Story 1. My father remarried when I, 25 female, was 14. His wife Mary, 49, and his stepdaughter Kyla, 26, were a nightmare in my life. My father is wealthy, so we used to go to fancy schools. Kyla was very mean to me, and I had a hard time to the point that I had to move to another school because I couldn't take it anymore. Once, she convinced my father and Mary that I was pregnant. It was so embarrassing because I was still a virgin, and yet she and Mary convinced my father that I should do a pregnancy test. After it came back negative, she told some of her friends at school that she was 1 year ahead of me and that I had a procedure. The bullying was non-stop. She would do anything to make my life miserable. Once she paid one guy at school to start a rumor that I slept with him. When I was already going to another school, she told everyone at my old school that I left because I was caught stealing at the mall and that I was in a youth detention center. My parents had split custody, so I used to spend 1 week with my father and 1 with my mom. After 2 years of a nightmare, I told my father that I wouldn't stay at his place anymore and our relationship was reduced to 2 weekends a month. My relationship with my father was non-existent during my college days. He would send me money and call me once every month, and that was it. I went to his house once or twice during my 5 years in college. I started dating my fiancé Louis, 26 male, 4 years ago, and I only introduced him to my father after more than 2 years of relationship. I'm getting married this spring, and we will get married at the beach in another European country. Both families are wealthy, and we decided to offer a stay at the hotel to our guests, and they'll pay only for their tickets. Because of that, we chose to settle on a small number of guests, around 80, and of course Kyla is not one of them. The wedding plan started 3 months ago, and my father knew I wouldn't invite Kyla. However, he flipped out now and said I needed to invite her. I told him that I would not invite a person I didn't have one good memory of to such a big day. We've been fighting about that since then. This last week, he told me that I shouldn't count on his money if Kyla isn't invited. And my mom said, fine, I'll pay for everything then. After that, he said that he was not coming to the wedding without Kyla, and I replied, fine. My grandma and aunt are trying to convince me to invite Kyla for our family's good, but honestly, I'm not even sure if we are a family. Am I the idiot for not inviting a person who bullied me for years to one of the biggest days in my life? My father says he's not paying or coming to the wedding without her. Edit. My father was up on everything and he never took it seriously. My grandma lives in another country, and I don't know how much she knew at the time, but she knows to some extent now. My aunt knows everything because her daughter is one of my best friends and my bridesmaid. My grandma's point is, what will people think about a wedding without your father? And my aunt says that I might regret that in the future. Life's too short, my father loves me, and I'll understand and miss him. You're not the idiot. I'm sorry your dad had spent 11 years putting your stepsister ahead of you. My grandma and aunt are trying to convince me to invite Kyla for the sake of our family. Where was all that concern when you were being tormented to the point where it shattered the family? Did they ever suggest to Kyla, her mother, or your father that she stop her atrocious behavior? I'd be ready to break ties with all of them if they don't stop trying to tell you to fix the family that was broken by Kyla, her mom, and your dad. What will people think? If anyone asks why he was absent, say, he was invited and chose not to come. Trust me, this makes him look bad and pits the ownership on him to explain. Your grandmother is more concerned about appearances than your feelings. Don't back down. You will regret it forever if you do, because this will taint the memories of your wedding. Honestly, I would threaten to disinvite Grandma too if she keeps pushing it. But my father loves me. No, he doesn't. It's a brutal truth, but a failure to demonstrate caring actions is a failure to love. I'm sorry to tell you this, your father doesn't love you. If he did, his stepdaughter would have been out of his house to keep a relationship with you. If his wife had to go too, she would have been thrown out too. Darling, wake up. He straight up pulled out of your wedding and tried to hold money over you, so the person who bullied you, clearly showing outright preference and favoritism. You need to re-examine your relationship with him because he is an idiot. You're in denial, and I'm her godfather. She's the only kid in the family for now, so she is pretty spoiled. Her birthday party was last Saturday. My sister said my niece wanted a Disney-themed birthday Encanto, so my sister asked me to dress up as one of the characters. We usually do this for my niece since she likes it and it's fun. I said yes 3 weeks ago, so please keep that in mind. My wife, 25, is pregnant. She's 9 weeks along, but she's already having a lot of symptoms and she doesn't feel great. She has a lot of nausea, some smells get her very sick, and she's just feeling tired and moody since she's not getting a lot of sleep either. The day before the party, she'd been sick most of the night, so we didn't sleep well. The party was at 2 p.m. My wife told me to go to the party because she could stay alone. She was tired and feeling quite needy, but she was mostly fine, no nausea at the moment. She was able to eat something and was a bit more comfortable, but I felt terrible leaving her alone, so I decided to stay with her so we could cuddle and rest. I texted my sister at around 1:45 to let her know I wasn't coming to the party. Now, I know my sister. I know that she and our family would have called me and sent me texts to try to get me to go. So my wife and I turned off our phones so we could have a peaceful nap. Just as I thought, hours later when I turned on my phone again, I had tons of calls and missed texts. I read the texts, and it seemed like at some point my niece had a big tantrum because I wasn't there, because I promised her to go as one of the movie's characters and play with her and the kids. She refused to do anything and listen to her parents, so, long story short, they had to end the party early. My whole family is blaming me for ruining the party. My sister said I was an idiot because I promised her daughter to be there, dressed up, and then didn't show up. I reminded her that I said yes 3 weeks ago, so a lot can change in those 3 weeks. I told them what my wife was going through and why I wanted to stay with her. They told me off and said that she, my wife, was somehow trying to get me away from them. They said that she's an adult and doesn't need to be pampered all the time. She could be alone for a couple of hours. I told them off for acting and talking like that about her and said that I could do whatever I wanted with my time. And I told my sister that if she raised her daughter better, she wouldn't have made that scene. We had a big argument, which ended in insults. Now almost everyone is on their side rather than mine. Am I really wrong here? I feel like they're not trying to understand why I didn't go to the party. I'd rather have my wife feel great and go to the birthday party than this. They say that I'm acting selfish, but to me they're the selfish ones. Am I the idiot for choosing my wife instead of my niece? You are the idiot. They're not trying to understand because you suddenly say you aren't coming 15 minutes beforehand and then shut off your phone. If someone does that before my kid's birthday, I'm going to be really angry. If this was an adult birthday party, sure, no big deal, but to a young child. You said you would be there, and then didn't even explain to her yourself why you wouldn't be there, and now everyone else has to deal with the fallout of it. They aren't being selfish, and I'm willing to bet you'll have a very different attitude when suddenly an adult is ducking out on an important event for your kid 15 minutes beforehand. You skipped the party for literally no reason at all. Your wife was completely fine. Even worse, you blamed her as your reason even in this post. Now your family is all blaming her for your nonsensical choice. She told you to go. You were probably tired from waking up too. You should have just said you were unwell and not thrown your wife under the bus. A pregnant wife is, and should be, a priority. But the rest of your life doesn't stop. But I'm choosing my pregnant wife instead of my niece. You chose a nap over your niece, not your pregnant wife. Your pregnant wife was completely fine during those hours, and also napping. Dude, you owe your niece an apology, and another one to your wife for throwing her under the bus. My stepdaughter Mia is 23 now, and has dreamed of working in the fashion world since she was young. I was married to her father when she was 15. She took many courses to work on herself, and I might say she's good at picking fabrics and colors. However, she isn't good at designing. She's a good stylist, but not a good designer. I started my business 16 years ago. It was very small and low budget, but I was lucky enough to expand it to where it is now. Still not the biggest company out there, but big enough in my region. Part of my expansion plan was to hire other young designers, so my team and I are pretty selective of who gets the job and who doesn't because the designs are products we sell, so it has to be good and pass by the judgment board. This also means I'm not the sole judge who gets to choose. While I most definitely can, I prefer to hear what others have and decide with them. My husband asked me to have Mia as a designer in my company. From the very start, I knew Mia wasn't a good designer, but I told my husband to have her apply for the job and submit her papers for me and the team to look at them and examine her skills. I think he was surprised I said apply for it instead of an immediate yes, but he still told Mia, who sent a thank you text for helping her. I don't know what exactly my husband told her so she would send a thank you text, but I replied saying that I'd be waiting for her along with the judges to examine her work constructively and wish her luck. I honestly didn't know till this day if my husband lied to her, or if she sent such a text to guilt-trip me. I have no clue. Anyway, her day came, and no one saw her stuff on a par with our criteria, so she was sent an email that she wasn't accepted. Let's just say it all broke loose from there. My husband came to me about how this is nonsense and unfair that I didn't accept her. I told him I wasn't the sole decider. I had a system in place full of judges, but he wanted me to bend the system for Mia. If I did that, my credibility in front of my employees would sink, and I'd lose them eventually. Plus, if Mia got in, her fellow designers wouldn't respect her because she'd only get in for being my relative, not for her skills, which are far behind her fellow designers. It's a huge risk for me, ethically and financially, to include Mia. My husband proceeded to tell me the list of courses and work Mia has done to achieve her dream. I told him I understood, but she still didn't have the skills to meet my criteria. She could apply somewhere else and get accepted. Mia later sent me a long text about how I failed her, and she didn't want to see or hear of me anymore. Not the idiot. Your husband needs to understand that just because she's your stepdaughter doesn't mean she'll be hired automatically. Will there be a position where she can be a stylist instead of a designer since you mentioned she's good at it? Or maybe she can become an apprentice first instead of giving the position to her. Good job for showing integrity to your team. She also sounds very entitled. Imagine expecting a job based on knowing the owner and lashing out upon those expectations not being met. Sheesh, have you ever helped her out? Offered her constructive criticism? Helped her with her schoolwork or offered her an internship? She is someone close to you who wants to be in the same industry, so I would think you would try to mentor her a bit. Honestly, it sounds like you don't want to help her in any way. Maybe she jumped too high asking for a job, but you and I both know that most industries have some degree of nepotism, and fashion does, so her request was not unreasonable. Look again, not hiring her as a designer, fair enough. Not offering to help her in any way throughout the years, you are the idiot. And sure, maybe she should have asked. But let me ask you this. If it had been your biological daughter, your best friend's kid, or a niece, you wouldn't have offered more help or support from the get-go. And if you had offered earlier, you probably wouldn't be in this situation right now. This is not your cousin's neighbor's best friend's daughter. This is your stepdaughter. My wife, 38, and I, 39 male, have been married for 12 years and have 3 kids, tween and pre-tween twins. About 8 months ago, my wife's sister, Ann, 29, went through a pretty traumatic time. She found out she was pregnant with her longtime boyfriend of 6 years. It wasn't planned, but that didn't lessen the heartbreak when she lost the pregnancy at 10 weeks. To make things even worse, her boyfriend left her 2 months later. Ann lives about 15 minutes from us, so obviously we were there to support her with anything she needed. Neither my wife nor Ann are close to their parents, so we're pretty much the only family Ann has. Ann was understandably heartbroken by what happened and was struggling pretty hard. My wife was diligent about making sure Ann didn't do anything stupid when her mental health was struggling, so she included her in everything we did so she could keep an eye on her. This included turning an extra room in our house into a bedroom for Ann. The room had previously been a gaming and playroom. For the past 6 months, Ann has been staying at our house 4 or 5 nights a week. She still has her apartment, but she spends most of her time at our house and is included in our family plans. At first, I was understanding and knew my wife wanted to keep a close eye on Anne because she struggled so badly. But having another adult in our house pretty much all the time has been wearing on me. Anne doesn't do much to help around the house, and any time there's mention of chores or cleaning, she'll hurry off back to her apartment with some excuse. Whenever I bring this up to my wife, she'll make excuses for Anne and say that she's a guest, so we can't expect her to help around the house. Anne is also now very different around our kids. She used to be a very involved and fun aunt and would babysit for us so we could have date nights. But now she refuses to be left alone with the kids for even short periods because she says it's bad for her mental health after what happened. The other day, I asked my wife if she could ask Anne to watch the kids on Valentine's Day so we can go out together, and she refused and said I should know we can't ask that of her. It started a fight between us about Anne, and I expressed frustration with how Anne is always at our house, and I don't like it. I mistakenly said, "It's been 6 months, how much longer are we going to do this?" That angered my wife, and she called me a heartless idiot. Before anyone asks, yes, Anne is in therapy, and from what I can tell, she's doing much better emotionally and mentally. I never said anything about this to her, but her boyfriend breaking up with her was a blessing. The guy was a loser, and he wouldn't have been a good father. I understand my wife feels responsible for Anne, but I also feel like she has a responsibility to keep me happy too. 6 months? Jesus, you're not the idiot. You married your wife, not her sister. Just like babysitting is bad for Anne's mental health, constantly having her around is bad for your mental health too. If your wife wants to continue to look after Anne, she can do so at Anne's apartment. Your wife is setting your marriage on fire to save her sister. Not to mention being coddled and enabled like this is highly destructive to Anne's mental health. I understand she went through a loss, but if she continues to worm her way into Opie and his wife's lives as a means to live out the family she never got, she's never actually going to get better at all. And Opie, even as a guest, I clean the damn house. Your wife is holding her precious sister and herself back. This is not a healthy dynamic anymore. Exactly, staying 4 or 5 nights a week is not a guest, it's a resident. A resident who does 0 cleaning, 0 childcare, and nothing to help. Not counting the extra cost of food and utilities. I get being empathetic to what happened. No one should have to suffer through that. But you also shouldn't have to endure 6 months of supporting someone you didn't marry. Thanks for listening.